All right, my folks online, welcome back to the 2022 Mill Summit. We're having a great time. Welcome back to my folks that are online, viewers from all across the country, all across the world. Shout out to all my folks that are here live, here at the Queen. I hope you guys enjoyed the Family Feud. That was so much fun. That was definitely impromptu. We didn't plan that at all. Thank you. Great improv. And we are available for hire. Shameless plug. All right, all jokes aside, we're about to have two great panel discussions. We're going to have a panel discussion that's going to be going on upstairs in the Olympia room, which is going to be a financial panel discussion. So please, online, click over to the Olympia room. If you want to go check that out, for my folks that are here, if you want to go upstairs, check that out. But here in the main stage, we're going to have a great conversation between two wonderful young leaders from Highmark and Discover. We're going to talk to you about the intersection of nonprofit and corporate partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, please show some love for Denée and Rachel. I'm running for Natalie and Denée.
Hey everyone, good to see you all again. Thanks, Blake. So we can sit down, I guess. Okay, yeah. Did you want to change?
I just turned mine in. Hi, everybody.
We want to look into each other's eyes and your eyes.
Yes.
So if you don't know me, my name is Denée Crumrine. I think I met a lot of you yesterday. And today, in this capacity, I will be talking about my role at Highmark, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delaware, doing corporate community, well, not the communications piece, but the community affairs and grant making piece. And I'm super excited to be sharing the stage with Natalie G. Sabatino from Discover here. She's a colleague of mine, also doing community affairs work in Delaware. She's also a dear friend. So this is going to be a lot of fun for us, and we hope for you too. So do you want to tell the people what you do at Discover for the community?
Yes, first, before I do that, Denée, I just want to say thank you. And I want to point out one thing. I was so excited for today's panel that I actually got my manicure to match Denée's dress. So I just want to show everyone that there's a little bit of yellow on the tip of my nails.
Too.
We were very strategic about today because we were so excited because not only are we peers in this industry, but we are friends. And I think that's really important. So thank you to Denée. As she mentioned, I work for Discover. Very excited to be here. We are headquartered in Chicago, but locally here in Newark. Community Affairs, which is focused on volunteerism and corporate giving. In Delaware, you may have worked with my lovely colleague who is upstairs in the balcony, Amy Walls. Shout out to Amy. Yeah, she deserves definitely a round of applause. So we're here to talk about kind of the differences between Highmark and Discover and our roles. And I say, let's jump into it.
Absolutely. So, yes. So I know many of you because of our funding stream. So I'll talk a little bit about Highmark too. We're actually headquartered in Pittsburgh, and we are locally known as Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield Delaware. So I'm sure many of you may have our insurance coverage on the commercial side or on the ACA marketplace or our Medicaid, actually now Medicare as well. So anyway, I do think it's important to draw the distinction between our two organizations from the way in which we approach community giving and affairs, because you hear those words a lot, but they do look different coming out of our companies. Yeah. So I really do love that we have very similar roles and we're able to help the community and frankly spend money from companies that make a lot of money. So we do like to feel good about what we're doing, but there's also a bit of a science, a bit of a strategy behind what we do, not necessarily for the business side of things, but really in order to make an impact that means something to the folks that we're serving. So Natalie, talk a little bit to me about Discover's way of tracking or measuring impact and outcomes.
Thank you, Denée. I want to talk about that word impact. I think it's really important because when we think about impact, are we thinking about the number of volunteers? Are we thinking about the hours that we put into the community? Are we thinking about the number of organizations that we serve? For me, it's really about the people who are receiving the services, right? During the height of the pandemic, we were really fortunate at Discover to be able to continue to support our community through a very number of different ways. We continued by building playgrounds. We did essential hygiene kits for youth in Delaware. We also did teacher appreciation kits for our partner at Colonial School District. And I think for us, Absolutely, the data is important, but that lasting impact is what really makes a difference, right? That feel-good moment. We're going to talk more about volunteerism for that later, but I think for us, it's the people, right? And Denée, part of our role for both companies is to quantify that impact. And I think you're going to share with us, but how is that quantified at Highmark?
Yes, that's an amazing point because we do want things to feel good and they do feel good. I think there is a lot of merit to showing up for your community when they need you to do that and proving, not just saying, oh, we're here for you, but actually showing up and proving that. And like Natalie and I both sat on the COVID needs assessment committee. Sorry, I don't know what it's called anymore. It was
Strategic Fund Panel, yeah.
Yes, so and that was an amazing collective effort on behalf of Delaware Community Foundation, Denée, United Way had its fund as well, where I was just blown away by the entire Delaware corporate landscape showing up to make sure there was monies in that fund. And a lot of people, probably actually a few of you in this room, were on those assessment review committees to make sure that money was getting to the people that needed the most during that time. So if you were on that, and if you know someone on that, please thank them because it was a lot of work. We were reviewing like dozens of grants every day to make sure that people were served during COVID. Sorry, I really got off track there, but I want to point that out. So with Highmark, we have several ways that we're engaged with the community that I'm kind of in charge of managing the tracking of, and that's community sponsorship. So raise your hand if I've sponsored one of your events.
Woo!
This one, right? Yeah. I love doing that. I love giving money away. That's not mine. We also have blueprints for the community. Have you received blueprints funding? Anybody?
Woo-hoo!
Yes, you have. So blueprints is really something near and dear to my heart. That's our health focused grant fund. And we did $6.8 million out last year to dozens of organizations who were working on health related projects and programs. And that ranged from everything from housing insecurity to transportation to health appointments to American Heart is doing some blood pressure and I can't remember the word right now, hypertension network control work. And it is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding to see all of the different ways that our nonprofit partners and our provider partners are addressing very niche needs that are cropping up in specific communities. So one of the ways that we look at that is not just the number of people that they're serving, but how you're serving them. So what's really important to me as a grant reviewer is what are my dollars going toward that are going to help that health outcome? And is that health outcome something that your community has designated by its own accord that they need it? I'm not coming out to a neighborhood and saying, I think your health problem is this, and I think that the solution for it is this. My nonprofit partners are coming and telling me my community needs this. But we do track whatever it is that those nonprofits are tracking, if that makes sense. And also, sorry, we will take questions. I'm okay taking questions throughout.
Yeah.
So just raise your hands. If they're online,
We'll
in the
check
chat,
that.
yeah, we'll be checking the Hopin app. So sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there. We welcome interruptions because I'm going to interrupt you probably 6 times through this conversation.
I think that's amazing. It sounds to me, Denée, like Highmark is being very solutions focused and leaning on your nonprofit relationships to really be the experts in what they need for their constituents. How are you leveraging those relationships to engage your employees in the alignment with your investments in the community?
That's a great question. I think we'll unpack a little bit of how we differ in that regard. So we use a platform called Your Cause, which is hilariously always called My Cause within my organization. And that's tied to Volunteer Match. So for all my nonprofit friends out there, if you guys are utilizing Volunteer Match, please keep that updated because that is what our internal platform is pulling from when you guys are running not only volunteer campaigns, but donation campaigns. So we love to send our employees, or we call them team members, to Your Cause to look for those opportunities. Additionally, through Your Cause, we do corporate matching. So if you guys are looking for donations and you already have folks that are donating, we will match that 100% up to $500, which not all of our team members take advantage of. So unfortunately, but it is a great way for your organization to make money on top of a donation that's already coming in. typically our teams kind of do their own volunteering though. I don't necessarily have the bandwidth to manage that piece of it, but we do have very actively engaged employees. So they might go do a blood drive, or they might do a habitat or a food bank, but formally we're not as well designed, I think, as what Discover does in that space. Yeah. So would you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and before I dive into that, did you guys know that each letter of Discover stands for something? Did you know that? No. I'm not going to go into all of them, but what do you think the V stands for? Who can tell me? You're right. You get a cookie. Blake, give them a point. I don't know if you have drink tickets left, but give them some. Just kidding. So yes, V stands for volunteerism. We are extremely passionate about that at Discover. And D stands for doing the right thing. Those are two of our core values at Discover. It really helps to guide our company's actions and shape our culture. We're very fortunate at Discover that we really prioritize volunteerism in our communities, whether it's through a virtual platform, whether it's a remote opportunity, or in the communities around our customer care centers. I mentioned earlier that I had my wonderful colleague, Amy, who's down at our Greenwood branch. I also have colleagues in all of our customer care centers enterprise-wide. So we have someone in Arizona, Utah, Ohio, and our new Chatham location in Illinois as well. And we're really focused on engaging our employees. So certainly there's opportunities from all over and at every time. We do have a similar program, Denée, where we do allow a 100% match up to $500 a year. But additionally, a lot of our nonprofit partners, you guys know, there's a shift in giving to nonprofits recently, where some of our younger friends, they just don't have the finances to give to nonprofits, but they have the time. At Discover, we award our employees for volunteering. So once you've counted volunteer tracked 24 hours, we'll give you an additional $250 grant to donate to the charity of your choice for volunteering in the community, which is really cool. We also, part of my role is to focus and plan and execute all of our volunteer events. So like I mentioned, we're building playgrounds. You may have seen we built a new playground at the Police Athletic League in Wilmington. We do essential hygiene kits. We're getting ready to do a meadow in Newark. Whenever I'm looking to onboard a relationship, my first question is, how can we engage our employees in this nonprofit relationship? And I like to be creative. One of the things I'm most proud about is during the height of COVID, as we really went to our nonprofits and said, what do your constituents still need? What programs are you lacking in? And so, for example, Special Olympics said to us that their athletes were needing some interaction. So we utilized Zoom and our internal fitness center to do Zumba and dance yoga and dance fitness every week for them, which was really a cool opportunity. And our employees were engaged, and we allowed that face-to-face interaction that they were lacking because they couldn't be together in person. So I pride us on being creative and leveraging all of our resources to continue to serve our communities, which is really cool.
About how many employees does Discover have here in Delaware?
Just under 1,700.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. We're about 600 for Highmark,
Okay.
Delaware.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also do volunteer time off. You guys mentioned that?
Mhm.
Yeah. So VTO is like PTO, right? And then, and we're sharing all this, not to like brag about our companies. I mean, a little
Correct.
bit, but if you are a nonprofit that thinks that you could leverage a partnership with us in any of these ways, like that's what we're here for. We're here for that. So another thing that we also do the match and the volunteering match. So if our employees volunteer a certain number of hours, and we consider board leadership volunteer time as well. So there are a lot of ways in which our employees are able to give back to their communities in their own way while also still kind of contributing to a larger corporate attempt to be better in our community. So that's really great to hear. And I think you guys kind of do some reactive giving as well, like we do for like Hurricane Ida. So when Hurricane Ida hit, I don't think anybody really realized that was going to be as impactful to some of our Wilmington neighborhoods as it was. And I have to give a shout out to Delaware Health Options, which is our Medicaid team. They immediately deployed like a volunteer group of people to do a basic needs drive. We very quickly wrote a check to help them address whatever needs were kind of cropping up unexpectedly. So I think you guys are kind of in that space as well.
Well, I think that leads us into kind of our next point is how can employees or how do some of these opportunities come to someone like us or some of our other peers who are in the balcony? So how does that happen at Highmark, Denée?
I would love it if you took me to coffee first and like asked me about my cats before you asked me for money, but you can just go ahead and ask me for money too, that's okay. No, so personally, my passion is in relationship building. I love networking, I love meeting with new people, and I love hearing about both the tried and proven ways that our nonprofits are helping our community, but also the new innovative, creative approaches that they're taking. So the one cool thing I will say about Blueprints funding, which if any of you who's done grant writing? Everybody here, yeah, most of you anyway, have asked for money in some capacity, right? So one of the things that I love about Blueprints is that we're not just new things, we're not just existing things, we're not just programmatic things, we're not just capital things. We will give you money for anything you're doing as long as it's health related, and I know that you can deliver on what you're telling me you are going to do. So again, back to that kind of trust-based philanthropy and that trust from having some form of rapport relationship with you is super important to me, because I'm also going to bat for you essentially. When you ask me for money, I'm going to a council, generally speaking, of 12 external people. I'm going to a Highmark board of directors. So I have to know you as a person, you as a leader, your organization and your track record, because ultimately it's also my reputation along with your reputation on the line if I'm saying, let's give these people like anywhere from 5 to 250 to sometimes $1 million. And I need to know that we can have each other's backs in those situations. So it's a very informal process to partner with Highmark in terms of, it's not like you have to do anything other than set up time with me. But the actual request for money, of course, there's a formal application that most of you are here are familiar with. How about with Discover? You guys are set up a little bit differently than we are with the funding.
Yeah, actually, I similarly love to have relationships. I think one of my favorite things about Delaware is that, it's all connection based, right? We were joking upstairs is that it's 1 degree of separation. Kevin Bacon said there's 6 degrees of separation across the world, but in Delaware, it's 1, right? We know this. I think one of the things I appreciate most is that you can have a meeting with someone and spark up a conversation, and then you learn about a project they're working on, and it could spark up something in your professional life, right? I had a meeting I mentioned the Kaboom playground build with the executive director of the POW about a personal project, and he mentioned that they needed a playground, and we were able to fund that project. So it was a really unique opportunity to be able to support in that way. For us, we listen to our employees, and we want to support the things that they care about, because ultimately I'm successful because I need them to volunteer for our events. We do have pillars that we'd like our nonprofit relationships to align to. So we're a financial institution, so we want to encourage and support our community through brighter financial futures, make sure people know how to use their money smartly, right? Make sure people are successful in school and that they have a commitment to the community. Those are our main 3. And I also want to make sure that there's no risk associated with that. And that's more so for a reputational management piece. I want there to be some employee engagement, so a volunteer component, and certainly some branding opportunities. But the other thing that we do, and shout out, raise your hand if you guys participated in the ERG session yesterday. Anybody else? Yeah. So we leverage our ERGs in the community. They also have a presence, and they have some modest funding. So we encourage them to align with organizations that align with their mission. And so that's another way that they can come into Discover and kind of get their foot in the door and learn about what we care about, and we can learn more about them, and they can grow their relationship as well too. And we'll volunteer with those organizations as well.
I like that point about the ERG BRGs, because we do have BRGs as well. And that is something that's proving to be an interesting opportunity for both my nonprofit partners here in Delaware and my team members here in Delaware, where we are able to kind of create these, maybe a speaking opportunity or presentation opportunity from our nonprofit partners to specific BRGs that are looking for specific information, because they kind of, within Highmark, we have 7, and they're all kind of focused on different things at the moment, but it's cool to say, oh, we want to do like a mental health seminar. Do you know of anyone? And so of course we're going to look to partners like NAMI or the Mental Health Association. So I think that's a really, I don't want to say easy, but natural fit, right, for our nonprofits to kind of meet with smaller groups of corporate employees here in Delaware.
Denée, what's one thing about the Delaware community that really inspires you?
Just one thing.
You can do multiple if you'd like.
I think that the authentic care that people display for their communities is just, I'm actually going to tear up a little bit. I don't think that's ever happened before. It's easy for me, it's not easy, but it's an interesting role to have where I'm interacting with multiple nonprofit leaders and the people that they're serving, and to see the heart and dedication and, again, the care to get into their communities and solve the issues at hand, not just stick a Band-Aid on them, but get to the root and fix things. It's just incredible. Everybody in here that's working for a nonprofit, raise your hand. Round of applause for everybody. A round of applause. You guys are doing great things. You really are. It's inspiring to me. And it helps keep, I'll be honest, there are days where doing this work in terms of like giving out money, which I say very kind of blasé, and I don't mean it that way, because it's almost a burden in the sense that I don't know that I've earned the right to be in this position, to be saying you get money or you don't get money, or to say that give the perception that we're saying something matters and something doesn't matter, because that's not really the case at all. And I do find it to be challenging sometimes to carry that weight of I'm making decisions kind of on your behalf, and I don't find that to be fair all the time. So it's not a job that I take lightly. I know Natalie doesn't take lightly, or anybody in our line of work, at least I would like to think. We're not taking these decisions lightly. I lose a lot of sleep, you guys, when I think about having to say no or having to say maybe or some, you don't get all that you asked for. But it all comes back to knowing ultimately my nonprofit partners and all of you are going to be doing what you say you're doing. So, sorry, I didn't mean to bring the mood down.
Oh, yes, a question.
building up still today, just to make it like more efficient and mutually beneficial. And we have some great partnerships with corporate groups as well as like industry residential and people. But like, what from your perspective as a nonprofit would you say or recommend as tips to like make it attractive to how for the volunteers themselves even in terms of like your teams to make it kind of like an ongoing partnership, even if it's different projects. We have kind of like a lot of like one-off events. Ongoing things, but it's kind of a mix that makes it hard to sometimes build a long-term.
Sure.
Relationship with someone who has many interests.
So I'm going to repeat that back to you once so everyone else can hear and just make sure I got it. So how can a nonprofit articulate the value add of having an ongoing volunteer relationship with a nonprofit or with a corporate partner? Is that about right?
Essentially, yeah. Like, how can we basically make it so, like, sometimes we have people that will sign up.
So we're not pulling teeth. Is that what you're
Good
saying? So we're
not pulling teeth,
yeah,
but also
yeah.
like
yeah.
Sometimes we have people drop out the last minute. It can be
I
challenging.
know.
I'm sure on both sides.
It really is. You want to take that one first?
Yeah, so thank you. Great question. So in my experience in volunteer management, there are essentially two groups of volunteers. There's kind of your friends and family, right? Your dedicated volunteers who are diehards for the mission, right? So they're going to show up no matter what the event is. And then you have your corporate volunteers. They show up because maybe it's part of the business. They're there as a team building event. They might have a special interest in the mission. They may just come because it's part of the day for that day. But they might be a novice in whatever it is, right? So in my experience, we have to create or cultivate this experience that's going to satisfy those individuals, but also the people who might be experts in that field. Like, so for example, if we're planting something for the day, you have to make sure the individual who's never even touched a shovel before in their life knows how to use that, as well as a person who's been digging holes for their entire life, right? So for Discover specifically, 80% of our workforce is tied to a phone. We're a call center, right? So it's difficult for us to do a weekly of the same volunteer opportunity. So like a mentor relationship would be something that we wouldn't be able to do because we rely on our employees to do work instead, right? But something where it's more ad hoc, we would be able to. So like, okay, this month we're gonna come out and help plant a garden. Next month, we're gonna help support with our nonprofit event. I think a reciprocal relationship with your corporate partner and just saying, here's the need, here's how many people, they should be able to communicate internally, and they'll be able to cushion, because that, with every event, you know, from planning a nonprofit, you're always gonna have a 10% call out rate. So you gotta over cushion for that, right? So you need 15 people, you book for 20. So you make sure you get 15 people, right? So I think part of it is just communicating of what your needs are of the nonprofit. And if you have a good relationship and a good volunteer manager like me, they'll also be able to help you on site at the event day. So for example, coming ahead and communicating and saying, here's what the experience is we want to have for the volunteers. Today, we're going to build, I don't know, we're gonna have this event. So we need people to do registration. We're at the MILLSUMMIT. They need to do registration. They need to pick up trash. They need to make sure that tables and chairs, communicating those expectations ahead of time. So that way the volunteers know, so they're not walking in and saying, okay, what are we doing? But I think it's more of, also for me, I plan the calendar as far in advance as I possibly can. So if you already know on your book, a lot of nonprofits, you know what events are going to happen annually, and you can tell us ahead of time. That way we can get it already plugged into the calendar. We do allow our non-exempt employees, our hourly employees, to participate on company time. They get a certain amount of hours per year, but we have to get them scheduled off the phones, and that's at least a month in advance. So some of our nonprofit friends that are in the room, I'm like, we can't just volunteer 2 weeks ahead of time anymore. We need 6 weeks ahead of time to be able to communicate. So I think really the bottom line of what I'm saying, if I could distill this, is communication, 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 and just sharing what your needs are. And a good corporate partner will be able to say, no problem, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'll deal with it on the back end. Was that helpful? Okay, good. Yeah. Was there another question? No? I'm gonna check the app while you're looking around.
There you go. Thank you for sharing that, Natalie. The Discover volunteer is internally is super robust, and I find it very impressive. And unfortunately, I have to disclose that I'm not as good of a volunteer coordinator as Natalie, so I apologize in advance. Questions? Leanna.
Hi. So anytime a nonprofit interacts with a foundation or the philanthropic arm of any company, there is an inherent power imbalance, because the reality is the nonprofit partner needs what you have in order to survive and function. And oftentimes the person approaching you for support needs what you have in order to keep their livelihood and their jobs. But I hear you guys say the word partner and relationship a lot. So how do you, in your positions of power, account for that inherent power imbalance in your interactions with your nonprofit partners?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leanna. Did you want to?
Yeah, if you need to think. So I will disclose, I actually spent, prior to my life at my Discover, I was working in nonprofit. I was a fundraiser and volunteer manager. So I know exactly what it feels like to sit at the other end of that table and have an awesome pitch meeting. And then you follow up in that email and you get ghosted. And that was even before the time of online dating. And so it was even worse, because you thought you were getting $50,000 and then you got nothing. So I try to be as transparent and as candid with my nonprofit partners, and even ones that may not end up being partners, just because there's not a financial component to our relationship. We still do have relationship with organizations that we just volunteer with, or that we work with in the community as well too. the other thing is that I think even we as funders, we're really working to, and I know, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I know we're really working to be very thoughtful of biases in grant making, as well as funding, as well as volunteerism, right? So if we're thinking about an event experience or grant writing, not everyone has a professional grant writer on staff. It's not going to be the most eloquent written grant, and it doesn't need to be. So I think we're also trying to be very thoughtful and very communicative about that and saying, what's the purpose? What's the amount? And can you get it done? That's what I would say. What about you, Denée?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lana, and I know we've had conversations personally about this. And to the extent that I have the ability and capacity, right, to do this work, we also at Highmark try to be very, and I have to also disclose that, or not disclose, but share and give a shout out to Delaware Community Foundation, who helps Highmark manage its grant fund. We put a lot of thought into, is the application accessible? Now, I would love it to be in paper form as well for our folks, like in areas without great internet, but it's really just not an effective way to do a grant review, but that's a different conversation. But we also made sure that like the application on DCF's website can be Google translated, which I know is not the most ideal way to do it, but it is better than not having other languages available. And getting to that like concept, I'll say it again, trust-based philanthropy. When I review grants, I'm not like, there's not like a cookie cutter way that I do that. I'm reading everything you guys write to me. So please don't give me a dissertation, my God. But, complete sentences are nice. But I do read through all of that. And to Natalie's point that not everyone is a grant writer, not everyone has a grant writer, I'm not checking your spelling errors, okay? Like, I don't care about that. If you can convey to me in so many words what you're doing, why you're doing it, that you have evidence to support that you have, like, that you want to do it this way for a reason, and then that you're going to have an outcome that you're tracking and measuring, I'm going to advocate for you to get that money. Now, ultimately, it's not my decision as much as I don't actually wish that, you guys. I don't wish that I had the power. But I do have to answer to a lot of other people when we give big grants away, and even the smaller dollars. But to your question, Liana, it's a matter of understanding what people are trying to tell me, not necessarily what's conveyed on that paper or in that application. And again, we don't take that lightly. I do also come from a nonprofit background in the sense that, like, super involved with a number of them, have helped fundraise, and again, know the work that goes into it. And I think from a Highmark perspective, when we're giving away those big dollars, we're still very cognizant of the fact that our nonprofits are overworked, understaffed, underpaid, and probably a little misunderstood in what your missions are. So I spend a lot of time meeting with nonprofits. You get a decline letter from us, I will meet with you again. You're working through your application and you're not sure if this is an eligible budget item, people call me. I will walk you through that. I will tell you, don't put that in there. They're not going to like it. I will tell you, absolutely put that in there. I have even upset my company by saying, hey, you should ask for more because I see what you're doing.
Always, yeah.
And if you ask for more, and I know that then you can do this, easy yourself.
If you don't ask, you don't get, right?
Yes, but don't be like ridiculous, you guys. Don't just be like, I'm asking for the max. Yeah, because I'll see that too, because I'm checking everything. But I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry, we went way around that. But I think from a personal standpoint, you and I take this probably way too, maybe not way too seriously, but very seriously.
You use the word power. I don't see it as power, and I don't, hopefully this is not taken the wrong way. I almost feel it as a responsibility or as burden, because as Denée's point, it is review and working with them. And I probably am, some of the nonprofit partners that I work with here are like, yeah, Natalie calls me 800 times. And I'm like, no, I need you to take this out. And I need you to review, do the budget this way so that it doesn't look like this. And I need you to do, like, I try to make it, because at the end of the day, I want to be a champion for people, and I want it to, because we're the first line, right? We're making the recommendations. We're the ones selling it up. And we have to speak the language of the execs, but also your language too. So I think power would be the wrong word that I wouldn't use. It's more of a, the bridge and trying to be that bridge, in my opinion.
Sure. I get the use of the word, but yeah, for sure. Okay, sorry. Wow. That was a big question, but thank you for that question.
Did you feel like we answered it for you? Okay.
Okay. Were there any other questions? Yeah.
So I have a question regarding nonprofits and corporations versus, so what advice would you give someone who has been in corporate all their life but feels more passionate about working for a nonprofit? So, you have someone who maybe work for the state and they get the state benefits and all the beautiful things that the state has to offer, but now feel the pull to go to a nonprofit where some of them things might not be readily available for them. So what advice would you give them for that transition?
So are you saying that you want to work in nonprofit or just how you can be involved even because your day job doesn't like really give you that flexibility?
Well, I don't want to out myself. So
Your friend told you to ask,
yeah, my
right?
friend told me on the app.
You saw it on the
text
app,
message, right? Yeah, on the app. No, seriously. So I work for a corporation or state agency. And so if I wanted to go to a nonprofit side now, what advice would you, forget it. Take the mask off. What advice would you give me?
Yeah.
Right, we're all
Sure.
here. I don't care.
Okay.
Report them. I don't care.
So
What advice would you give me who wants to transition into a nonprofit
Sure.
side now, the private sector?
well,
Certainly be thoughtful. I will say I left my nonprofit job without another job, and I networked for 3 months before I was able to come to Discover, and I leveraged every single person and talked to them and said, what did you do? If you can do it without the benefits. The other thing of it is one of the best things, in my opinion, that came from the pandemic, living through the pandemic, is that I saw personally what was really of value to me.
what's your why? That's what
Right.
you need to figure out, right?
Yeah. And if your why is fulfillment and you are feeling unfulfilled, you can either change your day to day or fill your cup outside of work, right? So it's very difficult to sometimes shut your brain off at 5 p.m. Sometimes your job does not allot for that. And so if you are financially able to do so, then I would encourage you to explore elsewhere, and we'd be happy to help make a connection that's a right fit for you. And I know others in this room would also probably be happy to help you in that way. But I would encourage you to look out exactly what Denée said, to find your why, because I think that's vitally important, because you can't take it with you and the work's going to be there tomorrow.
And when I say why, I mean, like, why do you do anything that you do? Why do you get up in the morning? And I know that's like a big, existential question, but ultimately I think I'm going to give you some broad career advice here. Not that I should be giving any disclaimer, I'm not an expert on this, but there are ways to connect your personal why with the work you're doing already in your paid job, right? So that in and of itself is like a gift. If you can do that, great. Then you have to consider, is going into nonprofit what's going to answer that calling? Because it may not, frankly. There's a fit that you have to figure out. There may be other jobs in corporate, in government, in for-profit spaces, small business even, that give you that connectivity that you're looking for. So just be it's not like I left and said, I'm going to go to corporate because it's going to fill my soul. No one says that actually about corporate ever, right? But I was able to find a job that put my skill sets to use, which is great, while helping the community, which is a blessing. But also consider ways that you can invest your treasure and your talents in nonprofits if that's what you're interested in doing. Yes, nonprofits want money. No one in here is going to say, don't give me money. But they also need bodies. They need people with skills. They need consultations and guidance. A lot of times nonprofit leaders are wearing many hats, but that's not necessarily where their strengths lie. So if you're good at marketing or communications or budgeting or whatever it is, project management, they need that, right? Who doesn't need that in here, right? Exactly. So again, connect with anybody here will help you map that out. But I think there's a little bit more consideration to that than just leaving your state job.
And also, I'm not sure what your role is in government, but, or the state job, but there are community relations positions within
Mhm.
the government. I don't know if Marcus is still here, if he went home. Yeah, there he is. Marcus, will you connect with this young man afterwards? Thank you. Okay, Marcus is going to follow up with you about his job. And that way you can still interface with constituents, you can work with corporations, you get to work with nonprofits. It's still an experience. And then you could explore that further as well too. But Marcus is going to work with you.
Natalie, while they're percolating were there questions up top in the VIPs? I keep forgetting about you guys, sorry.
Oh, yeah, there's another question out there.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Denée and Natalie. I'm Emma with Philanthropy Delaware. So,
Good to see you,
yeah,
Emma.
in person. I have found, throughout after COVID and the influx of money that nonprofits kind of saw, there's a lot of questions about, well, who fund? I, may have some capital dollars from ARPA, and I have some program dollars because people were so generous during COVID. But what about operations? So there's, the different pockets of giving and funding, and there's a lot of questions that I've heard that kind of ask about how do I make sure that I'm getting each pocket and not just focusing on my programming, because I can't do programming without operations.
I think I'm thinking of an answer, but let me know if I'm not answering. That's a great question, and I think a lot of our nonprofit partners struggle with that, and I don't envy you guys having to piece those budgets together. Highmark, specifically, I want to speak specifically to blueprints. Again, we're health focused, so a broader point I like to make is sometimes it's a fit and an alignment, right? Like, don't make up a health program just because you want my money. Like, if you have one that's gonna fit that, please come to me. But otherwise, like, you're creating work for all of us when you do something like that. So I say that to say, we fund most things, like capital, operational, staffing, materials, as long as they all tie back to the health outcomes. But to your question, I think at large, being involved with Philanthropy Delaware, with Dana, with the DCF, with a number of other association of fundraising professionals, right? There are a ton of groups out there that create a community within our community for you so that you can learn best practices and figure out who is the player in those spaces, right? Like, who's my best funding option? Is it Longwood? Is it Lawfare? Is it Highmark? Is it Bank of America? I don't know if April's here. Or that's M&T. Right?
April is upstairs, but.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting my banks confused. So I think there's a research and recon piece to that, right? That you as the fund seeker need to figure out.
Well, and also, and I was going to allude to this, depending on what the project is, I will sometimes call Denée and say, hey, have you heard about this? X nonprofit is doing this and actually aligns more to what you're doing. Or I'll call up Denée and say, hey, have you heard of a project that's looking for this word? Because of organizations like Philanthropy Delaware and DCF and the Strategic Fund Panel and the Large Campaign Panel, because you guys have kind of corralled the funders together in the past couple of years in response to COVID, it has opened up a dialogue between funders that I don't think other states have, which I think we're very fortunate to have in Delaware. So there's this connection and peer openness that we leverage each other's relationships. So kudos to your organizations, number one, for helping us do that, but also for us for being very open and transparent, saying, hey, we're working on this, or hey, have you considered, like, for example, Barclays is very workforce development focused. And sometimes something will come across my desk and that's not really what we're focused on. So I'll reach out to Barclays and say, hey, this might be something you would consider instead. So it also is helpful for us because we now know what our friends, funders are looking for, and we're able to kind of pass that along and also make those connections for our nonprofit partners as well, too.
We want you to succeed, guys.
Absolutely.
I just want to make that clear.
Well, at the end of the day, we're Delawareans too. So we need some of the services that your constituents need at some point as well.
Absolutely. And so for anybody that has not partnered with Highmark before, let me just give you what you're looking for, right? Highmark, highmark.versaic.com. How you ask me for sponsorship dollars. Highmark.versaic.com, VERSAIC. And then if you're interested in blueprints funding, sorry, I'm just jumping the gun on this one, you guys just take the notes. Highmark.com/blueprints. All the information you need about the grant fund is there. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn or on the app. I know that's what you really want to know is how to get the money.
That's not true, Denée. They're very excited. Ours is a Word document, so we'll just email us and you can email me. I'd be happy to meet with all of you. I have a question for you, Denée, though.
Yes, sorry, I'm like taking us way off.
What is a cool project that you are working on right now that you're really excited about?
Oh, there's a lot of things in the works right now. So a big thing that many of you probably heard about is this like national shortage of healthcare workers, which is very sad and scary. But it's something that's really top of mind right now. So I wouldn't say it's cool necessarily, but it's awesome that Highmark can kind of step up in the space. So we've contributed a lot of money to primary care physician student loan repayment as an attraction and retention device. We have supported in a large way the Bay Health, Delaware's first residency program. We do a lot of workforce development space. So unfortunately, we are a little bit behind the 8 ball in that issue, but I'm very proud to work for a company that takes its provider relations very seriously because ultimately your access to care, your clients' access to care and ability to access care is super important. And the numbers are quite scary, actually, if you dig into those numbers. But I am really, really proud to work for a company that is putting its money where its mouth is in terms of saying we support our provider partners and in creating access to quality care. I don't know, is Nick Martin here? Is my friend Nick here? One of the cool things we've been doing with him is telehealth in libraries. So during COVID, our friends at the libraries noticed that a lot of folks were coming in to utilize both devices and the Wi-Fi. So then how do we literally meet people where they are? We are providing soundproof, self-cleaning, private kiosks where folks can access not just healthcare resources, but social services as well. And there's actually traveling health professionals and community workers that will meet with people who come in to see, do they need to get signed up for Medicaid? Do they need to actually go to a hospital or a place like that? And I'm very excited that in 2023, we'll be breaking ground with Ministry of Caring to open up a low-income senior housing community in Wilmington that will house up to 64 low-income seniors and provide them a walkable, safe, healthy community to live in safely and access care and other resources. So that's super exciting. Super exciting.
Very cool.
You?
I am very excited. I mentioned I have counterparts all over the nation. So my counterpart, Dion, who is in Ohio, her and I are working on a philanthropy volunteer podcast within Discover, which is really exciting, just talking about different topics, whether it's volunteer related, biases in volunteerism, corporate philanthropy, corporate giving. So I'm really excited about that project because I've never done anything like this before, but people think Dion's at least entertaining and I'm mildly entertaining. So I'm kind of the rule follower there. I think they just let me do it so that legal doesn't get upset because I like to follow the rules. Additionally, we are onboarding one of our partners, the Bovine Foundation, and making sure that all of our employees are trained to identify any neglect or abuse so that when they're volunteering in the community.
Is Nora here?
There she is. There she is. Thank you, Nora. So we're excited because we're launching that this month, which is great. So that's going to be life-changing for our employees to make sure that the communities that we serve and the youth that we partner with are safe, which is wonderful. So I'm very proud of that initiative because we've been working on it for 2 years to get it within Discover. So it's a long time.
So, sorry, there's a question in the chat.
Wonderful.
I wasn't ignoring you. For nonprofits who already have established partnerships, how can they continue to foster that relationship?
How can they continue to foster that
An
relationship?
existing one, not create a new one.
I think for me, one of the things, so I would love to talk more about relationship between funder and nonprofit, but one of the things that I really appreciate is regular communication. So one of my pet peeves is like hearing from a nonprofit when it's time to renew and not knowing kind of how the relationship has been, or totally understand and recognize that things happen and that at least definitely for the past 2 years, it's been a little crazy, but I do appreciate a regular check-in with my nonprofit just to know how the organization's doing, how your constituents are doing, and if there's any way that we can support in any way. I love hearing and saying, hey, there's this new opportunity, would you be interested? I'm not mad when they bring new ideas to the table and ask for funding in different ways. I want to hear from them. So for me, it's checking in and communication. What about for you?
I would say the same, and I would say selfishly grace for my partners, just because I don't have a team in Delaware. I'm the only one that's doing any of the community engagement, any of the employee volunteerism, any of the blueprints grant making, which we do on a monthly and a quarterly basis, and all of our internal and external communications for the company. So it can become difficult for me to like invest in certain pockets when other things are taking flight, and I'm so sorry because I know some of you have been ghosted by me and it was totally accidental. But I think the communication piece is great, and I think one of the other things I love about our nonprofit community and just the business community in Delaware in general is that room for like, if I like, sorry, like I saw your email, I'm not ignoring you, but I will get back to you. And I'm able to say that and feel safe saying, I'm really sorry, but there are other things like that I have to take care of at this moment. And that's not an excuse for not getting back to you guys. It's just an actual fact that happens. And I do apologize. But I do think the communication piece is key, as well as just understanding that, like, even though I work for a big company and it's easy to say, oh, corporate versus nonprofit, like versus nonprofit, I'm still wearing a lot of hats like you would in a nonprofit. And I think Natalie does too, and I think a lot of folks are in the corporate space. And so it's not a matter of like, are you a priority or not? It's just a matter of being able to juggle all of those things and wanting to give you the time and attention that's necessary and deserved to get through whatever we're trying to get through at that point, whether it's a volunteer opportunity or a grant application. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had a thought, Denée. What is your experience background that got you into this role? I know a lot of people are always interested in kind of corporate responsibility and kind of corporate philanthropy roles. What's your background and how did you get here?
So my background is in mass communications, which is also vague, but again, relationship building, networking. I love public speaking. I love writing, and I was a mass comm major at University of Delaware, which led me to a job at the State Chamber of Commerce. So I know a lot of you folks through that position, and I was really able to hone some of those multiple comm skills and meet a lot of really cool people over the years. And so comms is definitely where my strengths lie, technically. And then my love for the community, I've been involved with a number of organizations for a number of years, exceptional care for children, junior achievement, very involved. I love youth and education and youth health. And that's created a separate network outside of like my work when I first started. So did a lot of comms work, still do a lot of comms work, but when my dear friend Matt Stell left this role at Highmark, may he rest in peace, he and Nick Moriello, the president of the company, had actually recommended me for the role that I carry now, which my title is corporate communications manager, which is like very misleading because most of you know me from the community. And they kind of were like, you'll do comms, but you also do like a little bit of community affairs work. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I love the community. And then it was like, oh, you're gonna do 100% communications, you're gonna do 100% community affairs work, which has also been great. It's a blessing. So my background's not in community relations, it's not in public health, but it is, my heart is there. That's where my heart is. And so I feel very lucky to have a job where I'm doing kind of this dual role of technical skill set and then what I really feel passionate about, which is helping the community. I don't know, that's like a very brief way of how I got here.
No, I think that was great.
I didn't know that you could have a job in community affairs. Like no one was like, oh, by the way, did you know that you could like be in corporate social responsibility? Or like that giving away money was a thing that I could do, so.
See, that's funny because this was always my dream job.
Yeah, you kind of followed that path.
Yeah, I originally wanted to be a nurse. I started off in school as a nurse, and I shared with some of you last night that I actually have epilepsy. So during my time in nursing school, I had 3 grand mal seizures and didn't feel comfortable continuing on being a nurse. And that really sucks because I had all this medical knowledge in my brain. And I was like, well, how can I use this? Because I can't take care of patients. And I finished my degree with political science, English, and communications. 3 nothing degrees, no offense. I mean, they're just very general, everyone. So I thought, what about nonprofit? And I worked for the Ronald McDonough House and was able to kind of bridge the gap between the operational side and the development side. I had done some development in my undergrad, and I really thrived in nonprofit. I enjoyed fundraising because you get to talk to people. As you can tell, I'm not shy, so I really loved that. And doing event management, I had always been excited about that. And then I went on and worked for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, managing some fundraising there as well, doing their student series program where I was doing assembly. So I was being silly and yelling at students, and they are way less engaged than you guys are. At one point, I had a student like yell at me and throw up. So this is great. So thank you for no one doing that. This is way better. And I knew that I always wanted to be in corporate philanthropy, but that was something, a pipe dream, right? That's not what you get until you later on and retire. So when this job became available at Discover, it was more communications focused, but there was like a dotted line in there mentioning something about volunteerism. And I said, oh, I think they don't know what this job is. They don't know what they have. So I've been very fortunate to kind of grow into this role and really blossom in it. And then I was fortunate enough to get my marketing master's through Wilmington University. Any other WilMU grads? Woo-hoo, yeah. So kind of a well-rounded background. And
It's great.
Yeah.
Very proud of you.
thank you.
Yeah. It's been great to watch you in this space. We do want this to be like what you guys need from it. So if there are other questions, please. If you have it, put something in the app. It's not loading for me, so.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left.
We're happy to take questions. No? Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So we could talk all day about like our philosophy on giving, but that's probably not fun for you guys. I don't know, maybe it would be.
Hello. Do you have a project or something that you funded through your positions that you were especially proud of or happy to work with personally?
I mentioned a few of mine, but I will say I'm continually not surprised, but impressed by the work that you guys are doing. I mean, honestly, I'm not just paying lip service to the work you do, because I know how hard the work that goes into it, and I hate it when I'm like, I need more outcomes, you guys, because I know that's work for you, and so I don't want it to be that way, but I'm also doing like dozens of grants a year, large grants, and I'm also doing dozens of community sponsorships. So I know, like I already mentioned a few, but I will say, I'm just always loving what I'm seeing from you guys in terms of the projects that you're coming up with and the issues you're trying to solve, and the people you're trying to serve, because I'm very proud of the nonprofit community here in Delaware. I'll say it again and again. Sorry, you go.
No, I would say one of my favorite things about working in this role is when I was working in nonprofit, right? You're working a lot, you're kind of focused on the mission or the cause that you're working for. So you're not necessarily volunteering for a bunch of other causes. So here I'm getting to explore a bunch of other causes that I never knew I cared about. So that's one. There is something not necessarily that I funded, but something I'm really proud of. I teach cooking on the side. So I'm a volunteer camp counselor and I went to culinary school, so I teach cooking. So during the height of the pandemic, we baked dog treats for the Brandywine Valley SPCA, and we replicated that event at all of our customer care centers. So that was a really proud moment because I got to teach hundreds of employees, and we donated the treats to different shelters across the US. So that was cool because it had my passion of cooking and volunteerism and animals, which was really exciting. So yeah, that was kind of cool. Thank you for the question.
And I'll also say this, it's been cool to work in the health space with my nonprofit partners who are drawing attention to things that like I'm not going to be in tune with, right? So like health literacy is huge, which we all kind of know inherently, but there's like a workforce being led, I think, by PMG right now, PMG Consulting, and they kind of looped us into that. And so I've been able to place like one of our Medicaid team members on it. I just learned that Highmark has like a whole health literacy steering committee internally, and kind of serendipitously, if that's a word, Scholastic Book Fair reached out to me recently to say, hey, we want Highmark to talk with us about how can we like put health literacy focused things in these fairs and what can we do to like bring this material to students, especially ones in underserved areas. And I was like, oh my gosh, what like a weird storm of greatness that occurred that I certainly would never have been able to pull together on my own. And so again, like the nonprofit leaders identifying these really important critical issues that Highmark as a benefits provider probably wouldn't necessarily get involved with from a commercial standpoint, but that I can do from this community side has been really, really cool. Yeah.
The question was, what was some of the more fun volunteer organizations? Looking for suggestions. Let me ask you a question back. Is there anything specific that you're really interested in? So I have a number that I would, in mind, that I would like to tell you, but I think specifically volunteerism is what you make it, right? So Brandon Valley SPCA, Delaware Humane, a lot of these organizations you mentioned, animals, they all have excellent programs and opportunities, but if you're going in thinking, oh, this isn't gonna be great, you're not gonna have a great time, right? But I think you can make fun out of everything. If you like something that's really active and really fun, have you ever cooked dinner at the Ronald McDonald House before? That's a really fun, get a group of people together. They always need volunteers. Anyone here from a nonprofit need a volunteer? There you go. Cornerstone West, there she is. There you go. There you go.
I have a question too. How do you balance funding new projects in infancy or idea stages versus established nonprofits with track records? And that is something I deal, thank you, Chuck, for that question. That is something that I deal with on a regular basis. And I'll be very transparent that if you're a brand new organization with a brand new thing, listen, we have Philanthropy Delaware, where are you at? How many, like hundreds of nonprofits in our space, right? Like 647? About? Okay, that's a lot. So every time, I'm not gonna lie, I hear a new nonprofit pop up, I die a little inside because the funding market here is incredibly competitive already, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Because 90% of the time, there is an organization already doing something similar to what you're trying to do, and as much as I know you want to be an executive director, and as much as I know you're really passionate about it, if the goal is to serve and the goal is to produce outcomes, it's not about you, right? And so who's already doing work in that space and doing it well, and how can you partner with them? That's what I would love to see. And people will argue with me on that point, and we can have that discussion later because we're getting close on time. But to answer the question, we're not opposed to it, but it comes back to like communication and relationship. Do I know you to some extent? Do you have a good track record as a person and as a leader in our community? Have you done your research, again, in who's already doing work in the space? And what are you bringing to the table? Are you filling a gap? Because that's good. If you are, then we'll talk to you. But if you're not, like, I'm feeding the homeless, yeah, so is like so many other things, and it's great that you're doing that. I love that for you. But we already fund 17 organizations feeding the homeless. And I'm not saying that to be like discouraging or mean. I only have this many dollars to give, right? And so I'm not gonna give it all to feeding the homeless. Unfortunately, that's not how we do it. But a lot of it comes down to your reputation, your ability to fill a gap that exists and is needing to be filled, not just when you think it needs to be filled, and doing so in partnership with others. Like if you go like brand new and you're like, I'm a brand new organization, I'm gonna do this, but I don't know anybody else in this space, and I'm just gonna go for it, even though I have no nonprofit leadership experience, I have no experience doing like operational project management, any of those things. That's very scary for me. That's like you opening up a business and going to some, startup funding people and saying, I have no idea what I'm doing, but you should still give me $10,000 seed money, right? It's kind of the same thing. So it's a matter of, and even with my established partners, they know this, that their application has to be strong, and that it's not guaranteed I'm gonna fund them even if it is, unfortunately. So I think when it comes to the balance, it just really depends on what's coming through the queue, and then what that nonprofit is able to articulate in terms of, I'm new, but this is how I'm gonna do it and why it's gonna succeed, or I'm existing, and this is how I'm going to succeed. Does that make sense? I don't know if that answers the question, right?
Yeah, I think the only pieces that didn't get to answer was like, how are they going? If you do, what are your expectations? I think for us, instead of, because it's a potential risk, right? If you're thinking from a capital perspective, you use the new business model, right? So if you're investing capital, there's potential, is the risk greater than the reward? What's the return on the investment? Yada, yada, yada. I think for us, because we have such a high volunteer engagement, we would onboard as like a volunteer relationship first and see how that relationship goes, because I think for us, I have seen great strides in event management and how a volunteer capacity is very indicative of how the organization is run and how the funding relationship is going to be. So if it's a strong and wonderful volunteer experience, they're going to be a good funding partner too, in my experience. So I think we would do that as a new relationship, get to know one another, build a strong foundation, and then work towards a more funding relationship. I don't think that we should deter people from reaching out and getting to know us, but recognize that there is risk in that. But also encourage them to do their research, because we are a small state. We are the banking capital of the United States, but there is limited dollars because there are so many worthy causes.
We recently gave $700,000 to Gaudentia, which in and of itself is a fairly established organization. They're opening Delaware's only maternal substance use disorder facility. That is a risk for Highmark as an insurer and a larger corporation that's also a health provider. So in that instance, though, we said that's a need, right? Maternal SUD. Need. No one else is doing it, right? In that capacity where a mother can go get treatment and not be separated from her children. That is so critically important. But what did we do? We sent a proposal to all the subject matter experts in our vast network of people at Highmark Health, with this 40,000 people in 4 states, and got tons of feedback, which Denée was super open to hearing. Took it to the clinical side, the coverage side, the treatment side, the DE&I side, all the things, and got tons of input before we said, okay, yeah, we'll invest the $700,000, which was capital to renovate a space where people could go. And so I hope that answers the question as an example. It was a new project, it's a scary project, high risk project. But we know there's a need and we didn't want to turn it away, so we did our due diligence and expect that Identity is really going to deliver on the things that they are working toward, which I am confident in. It's a wrap. We're being told we're getting kicked off.
So if you have any other questions, please come find us. I think our contact information is in here. You can definitely reach out to both of us. I would love to hear from all of you, and I know Denée would too. We can both be found on LinkedIn. Thank you guys so much for having us and the questions. Really appreciate it.
In the back, so if you stole some cookies, please save me a cookie.